Thank you. Ms. Holub, I'd like to start with you. We've got administration officials and some special interest groups that have repeatedly said that the pause on oil and gas leasing will have no impact on businesses or local economies because, as they put it, as they describe it, the industry has quote unquote stockpiled leases. Can you briefly speak to that assertion?
Yes, as I said earlier, about 4% of the federal leases available are oil and gas. So of the federal mineral estate, 4% is oil and gas. And of that 4%, 50% of the leases that we have today are producing oil and gas. The other 50% are in some stage of development. That stage of development takes a lot of work initially, as I was describing, to set up an optimum development program that ensures the prudent development and the maximization of the value. So there is a process that must be taken. And now we have, as was mentioned earlier, we have almost the lowest of all-time leasing, oil and gas leases on federal acreage. So given where we are today and the fact that we have much more advanced technologies, but these technologies take time and then the permitting takes time. So we're 3 to 4 years into the lease, into a federal lease before we can begin activities. And so it may seem to some people that nothing's going on, but a lot is going on these leases as we learn more about them and as we prepare our development programs.
Thank you. Governor Gordon, the president's executive order calls for this moratorium and review to address potential climate impacts. But do you believe this is going to lead to decreased oil or gas consumption in the United States?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, and Senator Lee. No, I do not believe it is going to decrease the amount of consumption of oil and gas. Market conditions are going to change. But it is clear to me that for the foreseeable future, oil and gas will be a very important part of our energy mix.
So in other words, you're saying we will consume whatever quantity of oil and gas that's for which there is demand. And if there's less production from U.S.-owned lands, it's just going to be made up for somewhere else.
Senator Lee, yes, I believe that to be the case. And let me also state that while we talk about electrification of our fleet, there's quite a bit of question about how practical that is, particularly in western states with large areas. And then we have hydrogen, which can be an alternative fuel that can help meet greenhouse emission goals. That can be produced from natural gas. So I think there will be increasing demand at the same time that consumer demand and efficiencies may make a little bit of a decrease.
Thank you. Ms. Culver, as the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia recently recognized, if a resource management plan authorizes oil and gas development on certain federal land parcels, the Bureau of Land Management must sell leases for those parcels on a quarterly basis. And this is not just based on something that a judge contrived. This is what the law requires under 30 U.S.C. 226b1a and 43 CFR 3120.1-2. So this is what the law requires. Now, this seems to be inconsistent with the president's moratorium or pause. Can you briefly explain to me under what applicable laws the BLM has halted the oil and gas leasing program?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. Right now, we are operating under an executive order issued by President Biden that directs us to pause leasing on federal lands while we conduct a comprehensive review of the program. Under the Mineral Leasing Act, the Secretary of the Interior has discretion to determine whether or not to lease nominated lands and to determine which lands are eligible and available for leasing. That discretion has also been delegated to the Bureau of Land Management, and I believe that courts have upheld this discretion, including the discretion not to lease nominated parcels all the way up to the Supreme Court. So that is the authority we are operating under right now.
Okay. Um, It is, it is important that we follow the law there, and the law, as I read it, requires these things to occur quarterly. I know I'm almost out of time. Ms. Holub, I want to ask you one more question. You mentioned that Occidental was the first U.S. oil and gas company to establish comprehensive net zero greenhouse gas emissions goals. Can you expand on what efforts you've taken to reach that goal?
Yes, we've entered into agreements with an ethanol producer to take the CO2 emissions from their plants, get it to the Permian for sequestration. We also have an agreement with a cement plant in southern Colorado. We have announced the plan to build the world's largest direct air capture facility in the Permian Basin. We've got the FEED study underway. We'll begin construction next year. We've also invested in Net Power, which, as I mentioned earlier, it's a net zero emission gas-fired electrical generator, and so it's the first of its kind. We've also are working not only just on carbon capture and sequestration, but we're working on other ways to use carbon. We've entered into a joint venture with Cemvita in Houston to actually produce bioethylene from using ripening bananas to convert the CO2. That will begin a process where we can start to use photosynthesis for converting CO2 on a large scale to bioethylene. In addition, we're trying to help the car industry with electric vehicles because we're trying to provide a cheaper source of lithium by investing in a technology that actually extracts lithium from brine water. So that's the other thing that we're doing. This is all above and beyond what we do in our own operations to ensure that we're reducing emissions there. And we've done a lot that would take me quite a while, and I know I'm out of time to address that. But in our own operations, there's a lot of steps that we've taken to reduce methane, both from a flaring standpoint and from routine operations through the design of our facilities and implementing more aggressive analysis of potential leak points and starting to take those out of the system.